Right there, geezers, Jules here from FGS, home of the Future Game Show, and I want to ask you something. Who's got 2 thumbs and can't wait for this episode to get started? That's right, it's Tony the Toxic Shrew, who is over here once more because I buried the hatchet with him. What's up, my friend, over here, so that we can just have a nice evening of gaming together. Wait a minute, what the f is that thing? Hey now, is that an early 2000s Mad Cat controller with a turbo button? No, we don't pull that crap in this house, mate. We use our fingers to mash buttons as God intended, my friend. I'm not having any of this auto fast. Is this why you brought only 10 copies of International Track and Field over it, just so you could try and do me over like this? Oh, that is a scummy move, man. You are a real rat slash rodent slash weird mammal thing. God, you know, get out of here. Get it. Go on. Yeah, close the door on your way out. Pause for sound of door closing. I tell you, it's not the only time that a controller has made a gaming experience an exercise in pain over the years. I mean, don't worry about him, he'll be fine. He's just a PNG, chill out. I'm not actually bullying him or anything like that. Remember he tried to kill me a few episodes ago anyway, so whose side are you actually on? You're meant to be on my side right here. Anyway, we're going to talk about controllers and how sometimes you get some really odd ones making their way through into the market to the point where you're just like, how did this get approved? And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, and I do mean we, because Nathan is also here to help me waggle, wave, spin, scream, and flick our way through the weirdest things that games wanted you to do with controllers. So let's have a chat, as I'm Jules, this is FGS, and these are 8 weird things that video games wanted you to do with controllers. Beat the out of it. Exciting boxing. Now, in the world of VR headsets, weird rotating VR chairs that made Nathan nearly and puke his trousers, and that sort of weird pulsating thing that you've got strapped up near your bed next to the mountain of used... that's a lot of used tissues. I know what that's for. Gross. Give us a go then. Anyway, what I mean to say is that as it stands, VR tech has reached a point of immersion in video games that could be as near one-to-one as you could get. However, while I can feel very sick to my stomach every time I rip a zombie's jaw off in Saints and Sinners and hear the swish and clang of steel right up in my eyeballs when I use motion-controlled swords, there's one thing that VR just hasn't been able to replicate just yet. And that is the act of resistance that comes from planting your big hairy fist right into someone's face. Well, unless you're like me and you play in a room that is designated too small by most VR headsets, so you regularly just smash your fist right into the wall. I felt that one. I tell you, I was just trying to chill out the other day and play that Kayak Mirage VR game, and I ended up just being like, oh, this is lovely, like going through Iceland. Oh, beautiful, that's amazing. Smash! How? Why? However, it turns out that there was a controller released way back that actually did let players experience the thrills of beating the out of their opponents by actually letting them throw hands at a bespoke inflatable controller. This is Excite Boxing for the Famicom, and while the game itself isn't too much to write home about, being a slightly more serious take on Punch-Out, the controller was absolutely mad. As here, you pumped up this angry looking fella, donned one of the very fancy looking sets of colourful mitts the game came with, and registered hits in the game by smashing his goddamn dome in. Or at least that was the idea, because come on, with a gimmick this mad, of course it barely worked. And because our little friend here doesn't seem to have been balanced properly, he would often fall over and not bounce back, meaning that you would basically just go, yeah! And then your opponent would just go, yeah, cool, that was 1 hit. Here's 7! Still, for originality and sheer oddity, we gotta give it props.
Infamous Second Son spray paint. There's a thing I love about first-party games released early in a generation, because they're usually forced to demonstrate whatever weird gimmick console makers have crowbarred into their new hardware, in the hopes that one of them will take off and we'll forevermore be playing our games by furiously scribbling on a small trackpad or blowing into our controllers with all the enthusiasm of a bathroom hairdryer. And I'm not talking one of those new Dyson ones. Yeah, I'm talking an old school 90s number. One of those ones. Infamous Second Son released early into the PS4's life cycle and took it upon itself to show off what the new PS4 controller could do with its improved motion control, built-in speaker, touchpad interface, and colourful light bar that was so popular that gamers begged Sony for an update that allowed them to turn the fucker off. And for the most part, Infamous Second Son plays like any other third-person open-world action-adventure title, but then does the spray painting side quests. Main character Delson Rowe looks like he exited the womb with a beanie surgically grafted to his head, so of course, he spray paints. It was either that or a skateboarding minigame, and knowing the average weight of a gamer, Sony realised they'd be bankrupt within weeks from controller repairs if they had you pulling off a 360 heel flip on your new DualShock 4. So throughout the game, you come across spots where you can lay down some graffiti, but the game says, hey, see that controller? Take it and turn it sideways, my guy. So you do as the game says, and now it feels like you're holding a can of spray paint. You control the position of the spray with the newly improved motion controls, and your finger is perfectly positioned to use the R2 button like the nozzle of the can. The improved rumble makes the controller shake and hiss like you'd expect a can to do, and every now and then you have to shake it to refresh the spray, and doing so causes the little controller speaker to let out a metallic rattle. And I don't know any other game that has attempted something like this. I've searched and searched online, but I just can't find anything as simple and inventive as this. Because on its own, it's not a great minigame, it's fairly forgettable, but in taking the time to do something inventive with the player controller, it's become a bit I think about all the time. The moment where a video game very believably turned my controller into a can of spray paint.
Look after a baby. Baby and Me for the Wii. So, as a man who is perpetually surrounded by small tiny plastic figures perpetually screaming thanks to the horrors of war that they find themselves in, you'd think that I'd be well and truly over the idea of creepy dolls, especially how I paint eyes and they're all over the bloody place. But as was proved when I went over to my nan's recently and she bust out an absolute horror that could only be described as that one baby mask wearing killer from Manhunt, I made a face that looks like if you could suddenly taste your own bumhole. No, don't like that, Nan, put that away. She also had a really cool collection that I didn't know about, which is all just giant wizards, right? With dragons and crystals. Like, genuinely, I know this is a bit off topic. I was just going through her house and she was like, she goes, go into the back room and grab some stuff. And we just don't go into that room. It's where she stores like party food from year 1999, just whatever. And so I was like, going through, there's a cabinet, and I was like, what's this? Clicked a light, and on it came. And it's just this bloody like wizard on a throne. And it's like all ice coming out of it and a big crystal in his hand. I was like, man, what's this? She goes, oh yeah, you used to collect them back in the day. Why'd you stop? That's the most interesting thing I've ever found out about you. Therefore, the idea of playing with and looking after a creepy ass baby doll in a video game is a big nah, I'll pass from me. Yet, this is exactly what Baby and Me for the Wii attempted to do when it dropped in 2009 exclusively in Australia. Now, the entire concept of this game here is to, and this is a direct quote, look after and play with your baby until their first birthday. Why is that timeline sounding so sinister to me? What's going to happen after the first birthday? Couldn't it have just been look after and play with your baby and no time restraints? What are you going to do to it? Anyway, what made this game stand out is that it used a baby doll as a controller, and it would be up to you to rock the baby, to sleep, feed it, and change it. Well, technically this is a controller sheath because you'd have to just like put the Wiimote into the doll to get the ball rolling, but still, it is a mighty weird statement to use a baby as a video game controller no matter how you cut it. However, this does mean that because it is technically just a controller cover, it does mean that you could technically play Red Steel 2 using the baby as a katana. I'm not saying that you obviously should do this, but if you are in Australia and you did get this copy of the game, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not your dad, I literally can't tell you what to do.
The NES Racermate Computrainer. Every so often, exercise and video games come together to try and attain world peace. Arguably the most well-known video game fitness experience is Nintendo's Wii Fit, which came bundled with a balance board that weighed countless children on Christmas morning and proclaimed them to be obese. Remember kids, Santa brought you this. He's actually a bad guy.
Pants are awful baggy. You got anything in there?
Yeah, my you want to see it?
But Nintendo consoles were dabbling with fitness-based experiences years before the Wii Fit came along and scarred school children. Take games like the NES Racermate Computrainer from all the way back in the 80s and had the most 80s name ever. An unlicensed product that allowed you to take a break from boring games like Mario and Zelda to instead cycle. Yes, It's a game that lets you use a bicycle as a video game controller. A bicycle was sadly not provided with the release, but what you did get was a bike mount that connected to your NES, allowing you to cycle in place and not pedal head first into your beautiful CRT. A handlebar mount that had a few buttons on it to traverse menus and a little screen to show you your cycling stats. And finally, an unlicensed cartridge that looks like something a villain in an 80s movie would use to crash the stock market, but instead, all this does is display some absolute dog graphics for you to watch while you pedal away those precious minutes of your life. Yeah, I'll just take the balance board, please. I don't care if it calls me fat, I can't watch this.
Act like you're being goddamn possessed, uforce. Now, I won't lie to you, friends. Sometimes when writing these videos, an entry will come along that makes such an impact that it entirely flips the script. And I do mean that in a much more direct sense, because usually these little preambles I do here set the tone, they hint at what's coming and basically guide you towards the grand reveal. Now this is a rather delicate balancing act, because if you go too short, you might not build up enough interest or give enough information, and the reveal is lost, or just people might not feel familiar enough with the concept and just tune out of the video entirely. But if you take too long, the same effect transpires because people aren't being fed on what they clicked on the video for and just go elsewhere. Therefore, it's about moving towards that goal with just enough efficiency to keep them curious, all the while laying out the stall so the reveal is all that more juicy. However, what this entry has done is rather interesting, as now I desperately want to talk about how this controller, which was posited as a revolutionary way to control maze games with nothing but hand motions, and I desperately want to talk about the fact that it is pure bin juice to a level above comedy itself. But you know what? We can't rush things. This is a pure one, my friends, a real piece of crap. Something that you won't believe exists, but at the same time are so glad that it does. Because not only does this controller fail spectacularly to actually work, but also makes anyone using it look like an individual who should not be allowed near livestock for all the deranged hand motions that they're using. All right, okay? I think they're ready, Mark. I think that they're ready to see Broderbund's magnum opus, the uforce, in action. So what we're going to do for you is play as much of the original TV ad as possible, and please enjoy the ride, because this thing is
uforce for Nintendo. uforce. uforce. Nothing but you, and the game. With the uforce power field, nothing comes between you and the game. uforce.
Wow. Tell you what, I got one word for you. Cinema.
The Konami laser scope. If you're like me, then you love a light gun. And I thank God every day for the invention of the NES Zapper and Duck Hunt, because I've long since been banned from visiting my local duck pond with a 9mm. But following on from the success of the NES Zapper, some genius at Konami thought, what if instead of holding a gun, your head was the gun? And instead of saying, David, put your trousers back on and get out of here, Konami execs instead said, David, that's a great idea, but you will need to put your trousers back on. Yes, building off the success of the light gun, Konami released this abomination, which is basically a wearable light gun hat, in which you move your head around to aim and shout fire to get the in-gun game to indeed fire. It also has an attached eyepiece for improved targeting, helpful for looking into mirrors and saying, yep, there's a virgin. As many folk have noticed online, the packaging highlights how the headset's inbuilt headphones allow users to play games without disturbing others in the house, with absolutely no thought that the game player shouting fire, fire, fire over and over again would annoy anyone. A real boy cried wolf epidemic set to happen there. I can smell smoke and little Jimmy's shouting fire, fire, fire. I'm sure he's just playing with his Konami laser scope. All good.
Talk to a dog, Deka Voice. Now, when it comes to ultra-obscure PS2 title Deka Voice, this was a project that threw everything at the wall to see what stuck and then just used everything that didn't stick anyway and then threw in another wall plus 2 tons of rebar for good measure. What were they trying to build and where was that analogy going? I don't bloody know, but what you do need to pay attention to is that not only did this game feature voice commands, but in a bizarre connection to another of Sony's oft-forgotten projects, allowed you to communicate with a dog. Confused? Well, don't worry, because that's kind of the name of the game here, because with Deka Voice, you are a private eye on the hunt for the truth. And through using voice commands to interrogate suspects or call out for them to surrender in battle, you'll begin to piece things together, all of which is aided by your trusty canine pal, Ryan the dog. What a great name. However, it turns out that Ryan isn't the only mutt in the pound, because if you owned Sony's Aibo, you know, their weird robotic dog toy, you could actually link it to the game and Aibo would begin to speak with you. After updating Aibo's software with a special download found on the game's website, certain melodies and questions would prompt Aibo to begin speaking with you and making gestures, and if you answered them correctly or acknowledged them, rumour has it that the game would reward you with bonuses and things like health regeneration. So in an ultra weird way, Deka Voice has you using a regular controller supplemented by voice commands, which is then amplified by speaking to a real-life robotic dog toy, which then awards you dog-based bonuses. None of that sentence sounds right, but what a wild ride.
Steel Battalion. As the years have gone by, with generations coming and going, I think we've done a good job of refining the video game controller to become something comfortable and perfectly suited to any genre of gameplay. I say we, I did f*** all. I was not involved with the process. But with Steel Battalion for the original Xbox, Capcom decided, what if, instead of 2 analog sticks and a handful of face buttons, we instead had 44 input points, 2 joysticks, a throttle handle, a radio channel, 5 switches, an eject button, and 3 foot pedals. Yes, in Steel Battalion, you pilot a vertical tank mecha, and Capcom decided to create a controller that truly allows you to be immersed in that experience, not only requiring its own desk to play, but also probably means you could pilot a short-haul flight without any formal aeroplane training. That's not an official thing, just purely a vibe-based notion on my part. What's amazing though is that all these buttons light up and can flash. I mean, check out the videos on YouTube where you go through the mecha boot up sequence at the start of each level. It is amazing. It's like a Simon Says experience created specifically to endanger epileptics. Of course, this was never going to be a game that sold particularly well, requiring a $300 peripheral that demanded its own room in your house. But it did get a sequel for, wait for it, the Kinect! Hey! Yes, in Steel Battalion Heavy Armour, gone are the 44 button inputs, and instead comes an unholy mashup between controller and Kinect, as players move the tank with the controller and control any secondary functions by just pulling down on invisible Kinect levers, making you look like a mime who's lost his love for the craft.
And there we go, my friends. Those were 8 weird things that video games asked you to do with controllers. I hope that you enjoyed that and let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. And I want to say a massive thank you to Nathan as well for helping me out with the entries on this list. I appreciate you, buddy, and I can't wait to see you in person. I'm pretending like he's here, but he's all the way up in Scotland. We couldn't be further apart. Well, technically we could be on the other side of the globe, but you know what I mean. And if you want to catch up with us on the social medias in the meantime, you can follow me over here on Blue Sky, where it's at RetroJ, but the O is a 0. You can follow Nathan here on his social medias, and you can follow my lovely editor Mark over here on his social medias as well. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Even though today we spoke about weird ways that controllers worked or asked you to do odd things in video games with them, there is one thing that we could always try and do a little more control with, and that is just by taking a little bit of time out of our day, each and every day, to be kind to ourselves, because sometimes things, the negativity, they can spiral out of control, and sometimes all it takes is just giving yourself a little bit of distance, a little bit of perspective by stepping away from problems and allowing yourself to calm down. Sometimes it's not about throwing yourself straight back into the problems, it's actually about stopping and thinking about our actions before we commit to them. And trust me, that little bit of advice right there has saved me countless countless problems by just going, I'm going to take a break. Put the kettle on, chill out for a bit. Trust me, it'll help. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.